Welcome to this short micro lecture on how to frame an issue. Where does this fit in the whole scheme of things? Well, there are 6 guidelines for doing a critical inquiry, and here they are. And as you can see, the first one is what is the issue? Once we know the issue we're running our inquiry about, we can look at the other guidelines, the judgments, the arguments, the context, the evaluation, and finally how we communicate. Today we're going to look at what is the issue. So how to frame an issue. Frame just means how to word it in such a way that you have the most likelihood of success answering your question, or the most likelihood of success with your research product or your portfolio or your project in general. So how to word it for the most likelihood of success. Well, let's say that I have looked through all the possible topics for my research project and I decided I want to do my project on the coral reef. So my issue is the coral reefs. Is it the plant life in the coral reefs, the animal life in the coral reefs? Is it something else on my mind? At this point, it's kind of a general topic and it's way too wide for one semester of one class. So I want to focus in a little bit. What I'm really thinking about is, are the coral reefs dying? Now, not only is this more specific, but it's a more important issue, right? It's when we do a critical inquiry, it needs to be an issue that is important, and the survival of the coral reefs is important. So I've made it an important issue. I've focused it a little bit onto just the question of the survival of the coral reefs. Are the coral reefs dying? But let me think about that. That still seems kind of wide. So maybe I can focus in a little bit more. Maybe I can take a specific coral reef. So what are the coral reefs I know? I know the Great Barrier Reef. I know there's reefs in Florida and Hawaii. And maybe I want to focus a little bit more on the coral reefs near me, the ones near the American continent. And I don't know a whole lot about that, so I Google it. And I get to this EPA website. And I scroll down. There's Caribbean islands. There's Florida islands. Look at this. Florida reefs have been in a state of decline for the last 40 years, with many reefs losing more than half of their coral cover. Kind of sounds like my question has already been answered for Florida. Are the coral reefs dying? Well, yes, they are. So if I'm doing Florida, that won't be quite so good. Let me try something else here. I'll keep focusing down. Hawaii. Maybe I'll do Hawaii. So I'll try the Hawaii. Are the coral reefs in Hawaii dying? Much more specific. Are the coral reefs in Hawaii dying? It still seems like maybe it's kind of a big issue. What do I know already? I know that there have been more bleaching events recently, and I know globally the reefs are suffering. And I'm thinking maybe it is possible to slow the decline of the reefs in Hawaii, so maybe that should be the focus of my inquiry. So I come up with what is causing the coral reefs in Hawaii to die. Not a question now of is the percentage of live coral reefs going down, but what is the cause of the coral reefs dying? And I can look into that a little bit. In that same EPA article, I found out that they said all these possibilities are endangering the reefs: solid waste, hazardous waste, nutrients, pesticides, pathogens, temperature change, chemistry change, coastal construction, overfishing, invasive species, and I happen to know sunscreen and tourism are often cited as dangerous to the coral reef. So I pick one that I find interesting. I'll pick pesticides. How are pesticides killing the coral reefs in Hawaii? So there's just one more thing I want to do. I want to keep an open mind. Maybe the pesticides aren't killing the coral reefs in Hawaii. Maybe it's other things. So I'll reword it, a little bit more neutral language. how are pesticides affecting the coral reefs in Hawaii? And that question actually gives me some options. If I start going into the library research database and find out that the articles about pesticides and coral reefs in Hawaii are very few, or maybe their chemistry is too hard for me to understand, I can switch it to one of those other effects, maybe the effect of invasive species. Or I could focus instead on the remedy, or maybe a specific area of Hawaii, Western Hawaii, or maybe a specific species of coral, just to make sure that I don't give myself too much work and get too broad of a topic. So in sum, this is what we did. We made sure that the issue was framed in the form of a question. We made sure it was precise and focused, so we know what am I asking and is it possible for me to get it done on time. That's a very practical question, but also a very smart question, because you can't answer some of these wide questions just one person in one semester. Is the issue important and of some controversy? Yes, pesticides and coral reefs are important, and there are bound to be interest groups on both sides of the issue, so it will be controversial as well. And did I frame it in neutral terms? Am I keeping an open mind as I go into this inquiry? So, just to put it in a shorter, less wordy slide, the issue for a critical inquiry should be interesting to you. It should be in the form of a question. It should be focused. It should be controversial and important. And it should be worded in neutral terms. Now it's your turn. I wish you luck in wording and framing your critical inquiry issues.